All right, so you've sent over a ton of research on teenagers and e-cigarettes, and, well, it's a lot to unpack.
It really is.
We're talking flavors, marketing, health risks, the whole nine yards. We really want to take a deep dive into all of it today,
Yeah, sounds good.
give you the need to know, and hopefully make some sense out of this whole thing.
It is a very complex issue.
Right, it really is. And, it touches on so many different things. I mean, we're talking tech, marketing,
Public health.
public health, exactly. And, the unique challenges of just being a teenager these days.
And how quickly things are changing.
Yeah, exactly. And, speaking of teenagers, one of your notes mentioned this study. I think it was over 80% of high schoolers who vape said they started with a flavored e-cigarette,
Yeah, that sounds about right.
which is a crazy number when you actually think about it.
It is.
I mean, it really highlights how powerful those, sweet and enticing flavors can be. We're talking about mango, cotton candy, even something called unicorn milk. Like, who comes up with these things?
Right.
I mean, these are flavors that you wouldn't normally associate with inhaling anything.
And that's the thing, right? Those flavors, especially the sweet ones, they're really good at kind of masking the harshness of the nicotine.
Oh, interesting.
So it makes it much easier, especially for younger users, to kind of get hooked without even realizing it.
So it's sort of like, what's it like? Like adding a spoonful of sugar to make
Yeah.
the medicine go down. But in this case, the medicine is.
Highly addictive. A
Exactly.
highly addictive substance.
And it's not just the flavors, right? I mean, you included some pretty eye-opening articles about how e-cigarette companies are using marketing tactics that are directly targeted at teenagers. It reminds me of those old cigarette ads, like with the cool cowboys and the glamorous actresses.
Oh, yeah.
But now it's all influencers on TikTok and Instagram making vaping look cool.
Right. It's like the new version of that. And it's just as effective, unfortunately. One of the articles you shared, actually, it talked about a study where teenagers who were exposed to e-cigarette advertising on social media were significantly more likely to try vaping themselves.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, so that's like a direct link.
It seems to be, yeah.
And then there's this whole idea, and I'm seeing this a lot in your notes as well, that e-cigarettes are somehow healthier than traditional cigarettes.
Yes.
I mean, I remember when these first came out, everybody was talking about how it was the healthy alternative.
Right. There was a real health halo,
Yeah.
a health halo around them. And that's a major concern because, I mean, it's true they don't contain all the same chemicals as traditional cigarettes, but, they're not harmless.
Right.
Like, for example, one of the things you sent over talked about diacetyl. It's a chemical that's linked to some serious lung disease, and it's in a lot of e-cigarette flavors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of scary when you really think about it. And, it's not just about being healthier. It's about the impact that nicotine has, especially on a developing brain. There was one study you flagged where teens who vape regularly scored like 10% lower on memory tests than their non-vaping peers.
Yeah, I saw that one.
That's a whole letter grade.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild. And it's not just memory either. Nicotine can really mess with impulse control, decision making.
And those are already tough things when you're a teenager.
Exactly. It's like those skills are already kind of a work in progress during adolescence, and then you throw nicotine in the mix, and it's like...
Throwing a wrench in the gears.
Exactly. Yeah, like trying to learn how to drive a car when the steering wheel's only partially connected.
Wow, that's a good analogy.
So yeah, it's definitely something to be aware of.
It really is. And it's not just the cognitive stuff either, right? There's a lot of research in here about the physical health risks of vaping too.
Oh, absolutely, and there should be.
Yeah.
I mean, we hear a lot about respiratory issues, and for good reason, but, you shared a study that found young adults who vape are 3 times more likely to develop asthma.
Wow, 3 times.
3 times more likely, yeah. But it's not just lungs, There's heart problems. There's even some research that suggests an increased risk of certain cancers.
It's really scary because it feels like, we're still uncovering all the long-term consequences. We don't really know yet what this is going to look like in 20 years.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing.
And then you add in the mental health aspect on top of that.
Yeah.
Your notes mentioned a possible link between nicotine addiction and things like anxiety and depression in teenagers.
And that's a huge concern. I mean, you think about it, adolescence is already so tough, right? Intense emotional and social development.
Yeah.
And then you add nicotine addiction to the mix, and it can really throw things off. It can really mess with their coping mechanisms, make them more vulnerable to mental health challenges. And sometimes it even makes it harder to reach out for help.
Yeah, and it's like, you add all this up and it really feels like a perfect storm, right?
It really does.
Yeah. You've got the addictive nature of nicotine, the pressures of being a teenager, and then, you throw in all those insecurities that come with just being that age.
Yeah.
And honestly, one of the things that really jumped out at me from like the personal anecdotes that you included from parents and educators was how many of them just feel totally blindsided by this whole thing.
Yeah.
Like it came out of nowhere and now they're just trying to catch up.
Right. Well, and that's part of the problem too, right? Like if teenagers aren't getting the information that they need about how risky this is, whether it's at home or at school.
We're going to listen to somebody, right?
Yeah. I mean, they're more likely to buy into like, all the marketing hype or just believe whatever they hear from their friends.
Right, because if everybody's doing it, then it must be okay.
Ex-
It's like that old saying, what you don't know can't hurt you, except in this case, it totally can.
In this case, it really can.
So how do we fix that? How do we actually give teenagers and their parents and educators, the information that they need to make good choices? You had some pretty interesting stuff in here about different prevention programs.
Yeah, so there's a lot of really promising research coming out about community-based programs.
Okay.
So these are programs that are really designed to meet teenagers where they're at and just educate them about the reality of vaping. And it goes beyond just lecturing at them or rattling off statistics.
Which teenagers are really good at tuning out.
Right, exactly. But yeah, it's about creating a space where they can actually, ask questions and get accurate information without feeling judged.
So it's about meeting them on their level.
Yeah, exactly.
But it can't just be about, scaring them straight, right?
Yeah.
We need to give them something, some tools to navigate this whole thing on their own. And, you talked a lot about the importance of things like media literacy and critical thinking skills.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about it. Teenagers today, they're bombarded with messages all the time, especially, online.
Oh, constantly.
So teaching them how to decode those messages, how to recognize when they're being, targeted with marketing tactics, how to think critically about what they see on social media, that's huge.
Yeah, give them that healthy skepticism.
Exactly.
But, it's not all on the teenagers, right? I mean, parents have a really big role to play in all of this, too.
100%. Yeah. I mean, one of the most consistent findings that we see in all the research is just how powerful it can be to have open and honest communication between parents and teenagers. And yeah, it can be a tough conversation to start.
For sure.
But just creating that safe space, for dialogue.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. And it's about more than just laying down the law, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's about listening more than lecturing, about expressing concern without being, judgmental. And it's about really trying to understand what it's like to be in their shoes, what kind of pressures they're facing from their peers, from, just the world around them.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. But, it's also about, setting clear expectations and boundaries while also letting them know that, you're there for them, you're a team, and that, you'll support them if and when they need help.
Right.
Hi.
Which can be hard.
It can be hard, yeah.
Speaking of support, I know one of the articles you flagged, I think it was a school district somewhere, but they were saying that schools that had strong anti-vaping policies, but then also counseling and support groups for students who wanted to quit, they saw a big drop in e-cigarette use.
That's awesome.
I know, right?
It's really encouraging to see that, when schools really take a proactive, supportive approach, it can actually make a difference.
Yeah, it's about creating that culture where it's not cool,
Yeah.
It's not normal, it's risky, and there are consequences. Wow, okay, so we covered a lot today.
You really did.
I mean, we're talking the science behind e-cigarettes, the psychology of addiction, community action. I feel like, we could do a whole other deep dive just on prevention strategies.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot to unpack there.
But, if there's one thing that I'm really taking away from all of this research and all of our conversation today, it's just how much misinformation is out there.
Yeah, and that's what's scary, right?
It is scary because it's misinformation can be just as harmful as the e-cigarettes themselves, especially for young people who are just, trying to figure things out.
100%, yeah.
Well, hopefully, our listener is feeling a little more informed armed with some good facts, and hopefully even inspired to maybe, start some conversations in your own community.
Right, exactly. I mean, we've got the knowledge, we've got the tools, we can make a difference here.
Yeah, it's not about, waiting for somebody else to fix it for us. We can all do our part,
Absolutely.
whether it's talking to our kids or supporting our schools or just being more aware of what's happening in our communities. Knowledge is power, right?
Mm.
So the more we know about this, the better equipped we are to create a healthier future for everybody.
I completely agree.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this deep dive with me. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions and keep seeking out those insightful answers.